All right, all yours, Vishwa.
Okay,
So
thank you.
get started, and
Yes.
others feel free to uh, ask questions wherever you are having some difficulty in understanding. Try to get the complete understanding of the whole process. All right.
Yeah, I hope my screen is visible and my voice is audible.
Yes.
Yes. So hello, I'm Vishwa, and I will be discussing about the Android sensor data transfer. Basically, I'll be discussing in brief about the Android app, which collects the sensor data from the Android device and sends it over via USB to some other device. This is the overview of what all I'll be discussing in this meet, and getting started with the overview. So the objective over here is that is divided into three parts. The first thing is identifying the sensors which are available on the Android device, and then collecting the sensor data from those available sensors, and then streaming it to some other device, maybe a microcontroller, microprocessor, or a PC, some other device, via USB, of course. And then once you stream it from your Android device, you receive this data on the other device and then process it further as required. So that's the three part objective. So first I'll talk about the Android sensors. So the Android framework has categorized various sensors into three different categories over here: motion sensors, environmental sensors, and position sensors. So each category of sensors has different jobs. So the environmental sensors measures the environmental parameter like temperature, pressure, relative humidity, light, and all of that. Position sensor is more about uh, uh, the physical location or position of the device, which includes the geomagnetic field, the magnetometer, proximity, and then there are motion sensors which measure the acceleration and rotation forces along the three axes. Now notice that uh, these are the sensors which are provided by the framework of Android. But it's not necessary that each device will have these sensors. So it really depends on the manufacturer of the device. And notice that some sensors have S in the superscript, which basically means that these are not real sensors; these are software sensors based on the input data from a few hardware sensors, and fusing them, they have developed these software sensors over here. So like gravity vector, rotation vector, linear acceleration, and all of that. So that is about the various Android sensors available. Uh, Talking about, so now once you know that these sensors are
Vishwa,
available. Yes, sir.
Vishwa, can you move back to the previous slide?
Sure. Yes, sir.
I didn't really see the GPS, right? That comes under the position sensor, I'm presuming.
So GPS is a separate module in the framework. So I'll be discussing that later. So in the sensor framework which they have built, they do not
Ah,
include GPS over here. So
oh,
that's a
GPS
separate.
is not included in the sensor framework.
Yeah, in this sensor framework, it's not included. There is a separate APIs for that.
And also the camera is also not coming into this picture
No,
here,
no,
right?
no. That is also a separate
So when you
thing.
say light here, that doesn't mean the camera.
No, it doesn't mean the camera. It's basically, I think it's another sensor, light sensor. I'm not sure which sensor is that. But yeah, that does
No,
not
I
come
think
under
it
camera.
is illumination sensor or something of that sort. How
Possible,
strong the illumination is, probably.
possible. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay,
Uh,
all right.
The
yeah,
Proceed.
the screen may dim and the screen may change brightness, right? So probably the light
yeah,
sensor. Yeah.
yes, probably that. Yes. Yes. So yeah, these are the different varieties of sensors available in the sensor framework. Now, once you know that these sensors are available, the other step is identifying the sensors which are available on your device, because it's not necessary that you will have all of these sensors. So what I've done in this application, this is a screenshot of the application on two different mobiles. I think this is an outdated screenshot, but yeah, the UI is same. So I made a list of a few sensors which included accelerometer, gyroscope, and all the other sensors which you can see, including GPS also. And what it does is when you launch your application, the application automatically determines which all sensors are available on your device. So only those sensors are enabled, and the rest of the checkboxes are disabled. So in my Android 10 Nokia 8.1, I didn't have pressure and temperature, but I had all of the other sensors. Whereas in my tab, I just had accelerometer, proximity, and GPS. So it really depends on the device which you're using. So so this is how you identify the sensors. Once you identify your sensors, the next thing is you register these sensors and you tell the Android OS that these are the sensors and I need to monitor the sensor data coming from these sensors. So once you select the sensors over here, the app actually communicates with the Android OS saying that, please register this sensor and I need to monitor the events coming out from this sensor. So how do you register the sensor? So there are a few parameters which you need to provide while registering the sensor. And one of them, like the parameter, is basically sampling rates. So the sensor framework provides 4 different kinds of sampling rate, for data acquisition from sensors, which is sensor delay, fastest, gain, UI, normal. So now each of this has a different, sampling rate, which is written over here. So fastest is basically 0 microseconds, which is ideal, and it's not actually 0 microseconds, but it tries to get the data as fast as possible, and which is what we are using in our application as well. So that's how you register your sensors. Now, what is a sensor event? Okay, I said that when you register the sensor, those sensors will trigger events, and then you will monitor those events. So what is a sensor event? Sensor event, or any event in Android, is basically, it's basically a listener. You tell Android that I want to listen to this event, and so what happens is whenever the sensor data is changed, an event is raised by the sensor, and this event can be read by our application. So that's how the whole registering works. So how do you process the events triggered by the sensor? So it's pretty simple. You have a method, a default method in Android, which is called onSensorChanged. So as the name suggests, so whenever the sensor value or the data is changed, an event is triggered, and you can read this event inside this method. A method in Java is basically a function, just for the clarification. And yeah, as I said, moreover, the events are triggered only when the sensor value is changed. So that's how this monitoring of sensor event works. Once you
One second, Asha. Can you go back?
Yes.
We are
Yes.
using the fastest sensor delay. Okay.
Yes,
That
yes.
was what my question was.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So now here's the catch. The delay is not real. So this is a snip which I took from the Android documentation. The delay that you specify is only a suggested delay, and rather the application or the system can alter this delay. So as a best practice, you should specify the largest delay that you can, because the system typically uses a smaller delay than you specify. And also the smaller delay you specify, larger load on the processor. So that's the thing. So when I say 0 microsecond sensor delay fastest, it's not ideally 0, but it tries to read as fast as it can. Or when I say sensor delay game, it's not actually 20,000 microseconds, but it tries to read the data, some value around this 20,000. So it's not ideal. So in our application, what we have done is that we are using sensor delay fastest, which gives the data as fast as possible, and then we are sending it at 50 hertz. Because on testing the application at first, so I tried it with all 4 modes of sampling rates. At normal, in a span of 10 seconds, I was only getting around 100 samples. That is like 10 hertz frequency. And with UI and game also, it was around 20 hertz, or 20 hertz to 50 hertz, in that range. Whereas in fastest, I was getting around 500 to 600 hertz. So what the implementation is like this: you get data, but you only send it once you have the 50 hertz time cycle. So you only send the data via USB after 20 microseconds, which is 50 hertz. So that's how the application works.
Do you average it, or what is done to the data which is coming at 500
So
hertz? What do you do
yeah,
to it?
what's being done is that I check the timestamp of the data. So if the time, if the data which was sent previously and the timestamp of the data which has come just now, if that is greater than 20 milliseconds, data, otherwise you don't send the data. So that's how this is being done. You will get
So you're
a
checking
lot
for
of,
the closest.
yeah, the closest. So it's not ideally 50 hertz, but it's closest. Yeah.
Okay. And
That's how it is working.
whatever gets relayed at the 50 hertz, the closest time to 50 hertz, you're picking that and sending it as the
Yes.
signal at the 50 hertz rate.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And you're discarding all the other data which we are having in between. If anything was collected, that's being
Yeah,
discarded.
discarded. Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yes.
Now it is good to know these things, because when you do the application, it makes sense how fast are you tracking these changes.
Yes.
That
Yes.
becomes a part of the application, or at least you should know the limitations and the advantages of what the
Yes.
sampling rates are.
True, sir.
Okay,
Yes.
good, good.
Yes, sir. So this is how it being done. So right now we have fixed it at 50 hertz, but later in the future development we can give the user the option to set a custom frequency, and at that frequency, around that frequency, you can receive the data. But right now it's at 50 hertz. Yeah, talking about how the sensor coordinate system and how the data is actually being transferred. So this is the sensor coordinate system, again courtesy from the Android website. This is how the X, Y, and Z axes are. And regarding the data transfer format, so what we have done is that this is the data string which is being transmitted at all times: $xxn colon space data array. So what is XX is, depending on the sensor, we have given this unique code names to each of the sensor, uh, which is basically 2-letter code names. And then N is basically the length of the data array. And then data array, for example, for accelerometer, it's AX, AY, AZ with gravity, and the length is 3. So the data format will be AC3 colon and then AX, AY, AZ values. So this is how it's being there, and these are the units of different sensors. And yeah, that's about the sensor part. Coming to the GPS, so this was a bit tricky part, and the thing with this is that so Android provides okay, there is an error over here. Android provides this fused location provider class, which for getting the GPS coordinates. So it's a pretty simple class which provides the GPS coordinates, and you can set the timings, or accuracy and timings of the received coordinates. A couple of things which we need to know before using this is that currently the application it requires permission to access location in background. So whenever you open the app, you will get a prompt saying that please provide location, and then you have to say all the time, and then that's the permission which it needs, the application, to get the GPS coordinates. And yeah, regarding the timing and the accuracy, so there are a lot of options available in this, provided by this class, saying that you need at high accuracy or medium accuracy, or based on that. And we have chosen high accuracy. Now the problem with this class is that it provides data at an interval of 5 seconds, and that is also not very consistent. So let's say at some time it will give at 5 seconds, some other time it will give at 6 or 7 seconds or 3 seconds. So it's very ambiguous, but they say around 5 seconds you get high accuracy of data within a few feet. And another issue with this is, and also the sensor, is that when you try to access this in background, so let's say you close the app and you try to run something else on your phone, or if you try to run something else on your phone, the sensor data will still go, because I have programmed it that way. To the sensor data will still be sent, but the location will not be able to will not be going as fast as it used to. So this is the snip which I've taken from the Android website, which says that if the background yeah, so if you try to run this in background, the Android OS tries to has a battery manager which prevents it from getting notifications consistently. So that's why it can receive location updates only a few times each hour. So the workaround which we have done right now over here is that instead the application launches in game mode. So what basically game mode is, like when you open some game in your mobile phone, your screen never closes unless you press the power button. Your screen never closes. So that's how it is. So once you launch the application, it will your device will not sleep, and unless until you change the application or you forcefully close the application, it will not sleep, go on sleep. So
So
that's how it is.
what is the rate at which you can get if it is going into the If the screen is dimming off, then the rates are
So
dropping, right?
dimming off, it's another. So dimming off, what happens is dimming off. It CPU goes to sleep, so you won't receive sensor data. And a GPS also, after I waited for like 10 seconds, but I didn't get any data. And then after 15 seconds, I got one. And then after that, I didn't get any data for a long time. So as it's written over here,
Okay.
you can get updates only few times each hour. So that's the problem with this. And even when your phone is on sleep, you will receive the sensor data for some time, but after that your CPU goes to sleep. So if you want to run the CPU while your phone is on sleep, you have to use something called as wake lock in Android, which runs your CPU even in sleep mode. But that
Sorry,
takes a
what is it
lot.
called? What
It's
is it
called
called
wake
again?
lock. Wake lock, that's the class name, I guess. But the
Okay.
problem with wake lock is that if you use wake lock while in sleep mode, it consumes a lot of power, like a lot of power. So Android suggests that you don't use it unless until you have some very important application for it. So
Okay.
that's why we went ahead with this, where the application will always remain on.
So having the screen open will drain my battery less compared to wake lock or more? Maybe that is
uh,
something which we may have to look at later.
yeah, but so that I that thought came across my mind also. But then the problem is that if your mobile phone is on sleep, and if you use wake lock, you'll get the sensor data, but you won't get the GPS data that often, because of this internal thing by Android, which is it updates only a few times each hour. So that is something
Okay.
which we could test it using wake lock, but it's I according to what I read on the internet, I really think that that will not work for GPS, I think. uh,
Okay.
so that's
Got
why
it.
this was the optimum solution which I could come up with, or the workaround I could come up with. So yeah.
All right. Go ahead.
Yes, so that is the GPS. And now I'll talk about now we know how to get the sensor data and the GPS data. Now the second objective is to stream the data via USB. So before jumping into that, now USB is a very broad topic, but I have tried to summarize a few important points of what USB is and what is the USB protocol. So, as the name suggests, Universal Serial Bus is a bus, and it is host control. So, in USB, you have a host, and you have accessories connected to that host. And at a time, a host can have up to 127 devices or accessories connected to it at any given point. That's the theoretical number, but of course, the practical number is way less than that. And a few other things about USB, that it has 4 shielded wires. Uh, so plus 5 ground, D plus D minus. So plus 5 and ground are basically the power lines. D plus D minus are the data lines. And there are various modes in USB, which define the speed of the USB protocol. So based on that, you use D plus D minus, but it's not required to for the Android to know for the Android application. And it's very simple. You just plug and play. You just plug your device, and then you can your USB is connected. But one thing which I'd like to show over here is that you need to know the VID and PID combination for the device which you're connecting. Now, what is VID and PID? I'll just show it to you. VID is basically vendor ID, and PID is product ID. So I have connected my Android device over here, and I'm on Ubuntu. I'll just type LSUSB. So right now you can see that it's showing Nokia 8.1. This is my device. So this is the VID, and this is the PID. It's in hexadecimal format. So this is a 16-bit number, 16-bit number, and this defines the vendor identification number, and this is the product identification number. So right now my device, I although I have connected the USB, I don't know who is the host and who is the device over here. I've connected it to my laptop, but right now I don't know if my smartphone is the host or my laptop is the host. So this is the default VID and PID of my phone. Now I'll just show you a quick example. So yeah. Yes, over here. So this is the main script. I'll explain this later. So if I just try to run this right now, I think I'll show it later. Anyway. So this is the VID and PID. That's important. And USB supports 4 modes of data transfer, which is control, interrupt, bulk, and asynchronous transfer, which I'll explain later what each mode does. And each transfer mode has, trade-offs between error detection, recovery, latency, and bandwidth, which I'll discuss later. So this is basically USB, about USB, and a few important definitions to understand USB protocol. What is configuration, interface, endpoints, pipes, and transactions. Now, note that this all terms are completely abstract terms, and you don't have any hardware specification for these things. These terms just define the USB protocol. Uh, so what is configuration? Basically, configuration defines the capabilities and the power capabilities and interface. So there is configuration. Under configuration, you have interfaces of the USB device, and then interfaces have endpoints, and endpoints are the real, the real thing which we need to know is that endpoints are basically source and sink of data. So each data transfer you make from host to the device is done through the endpoint. So endpoint basically it will either receive the data, so basically sink of data, or it will transfer the data source of data. So that's why it's called source or sink of data. And a device can have up to 16 out and in points. And out always means host from device, and in always means from device to host. About pipes, pipe is again an abstract concept. A logical connection between host and the particular endpoint. So let's say I'm transferring data from my laptop to my Android phone. So I know the endpoint which is receiving the data on the Android phone, and I know my host, which is my computer. So there's a logical connection between these two things. It's called pipe. Transaction, when you transfer a packet is defined by, a packet is basically a common, like a number of bits. So a packet is defined by number of bits. So let's say I have a packet of 64 bits, so it will transfer 64 bits at a time. One packet is 64 bits, for example. So when you transfer one packet, it's called one transaction. So these are the few terms. And then data transfer modes in USB. So as I said, there are 4 modes, but the important ones to know are bulk and asynchronous transfer. And main important is bulk, because we are using bulk in. So control transfer is a bidirectional transfer, and it's usually when the situation which I told, where I have a smartphone and I have a laptop connected via USB. Now, who is the host and who is the device? Because both can power the bus. So who is the host and who is the device, right? We don't know. So for when such situations arise, so before actually transferring the data, there is some protocol followed between the host and the device, which happens via control transfer usually. Then there is interrupt transfer. An example of this is our keyboard and mouse. So this is like a unidirectional and periodic transfer. So I'm using my mouse sometime, and then I'm not using it for some time. So it's basically periodic, and you need to transfer small amounts of data, but not very frequently. So that's where you use interrupt transfer. So our uh, mouse and our keyboard are one example of interrupt transfer. The asynchronous and bulk. So these are the 2 important transfer which we need to know. So asynchronous is basically used for where you need the data as fast as possible. You don't care about the error, and if the data is corrupted. You just need the data as fast as possible. So for example, if you're streaming something, such as audio or video, in that case you use asynchronous transfer, because you need the latest frame of the image, frame basically, or the image. So in that case you use asynchronous transfer. And the last one is bulk transfer, where you have to transfer a lot of data, but here time is not guaranteed, but you get error-free delivery. So in our case, we are using bulk transfer because the data which we are transferring at a time is just 30 bytes. And I think the packet size for my Android phone is 64 bytes. So it's very, it's very small amount of data, 30 bytes. So for error-free delivery, we are using bulk transfer in our case. And now coming to the Android USB APIs. So this is what I explained. Yes.
One question. So
Yes.
if can you go back to the previous slide? So I understand that we are using the bulk transfer. Am I right?
Yes.
So if we are, so right now the amount of data is low, so
Yeah.
it's not a big problem for us to use bulk transfer.
Yes.
But I'm just thinking, and this is a little loud thinking in the direction that suppose tomorrow we wanted to access the camera,
Yes. Yes.
right? So that would be a considerable amount of data or
Yes.
pixel data which will come in.
Yes. Yes.
Would that be better to go with isochronous transfer or?
Yes, yes. So yeah, that asynchronous transfer is used for such applications only, for where you have to stream the data from camera. We require asynchronous transfer, but then the problem with that is, some data can get missed or corrupted. So I thought I'll go with bulk transfer for now because the data transferred is low. But yeah,
That's
if you have,
definitely correct. So I
yes,
think
yes,
when you start off, you kind of want to make sure the errors are minimized before you
yes,
go further.
yes.
But how? My only question is like, if at a later point we wanted to switch from the bulk to the isochronous transfer,
Huh.
would that be a problem?
No, I don't think that would be a big change. We can change it easily. Like, the mode transfer mode can be changed easily at a later point also. I mean,
Okay.
of course, I'll be have to work on the development side a little bit, but I think it can be easily changed from one
Does
transfer
it
to another.
change anything downstream of your code if we change the mode of transfer?
Yeah, but it's not a huge change, so I think we can go ahead with that.
Okay, okay. All right.
Yeah,
I'm just trying to understand, just
yeah,
curiosity.
yeah. Yes, sure. So that is the basically USB communication which I explained. Now I'll talk about the how Android supports the USB communication and how the Android USB APIs work. So as I said, there is USB host and there is USB device. So this is a very good picture which shows the difference between both the modes. So in host mode, what happens is you have your Android device and you have some other device which you connect to your Android device. Now in host mode, the Android powers the other device and data transfer can happen bi-directional obviously, but then your Android device is powering the bus, whereas in accessory mode, the device which you connect, the external device which you connect to your Android, powers the the bus, the USB. So that's basically two modes, and the implementation level of both the modes is very different, which I'll discuss in a while. So yeah, as I said, host mode, accessory mode. So host mode is pretty simple, and initially when we were developing the app, we implemented the host mode, and I basically tried transferring data from the Android phone to an Arduino, and it was powering the Arduino and transferring the data to the Arduino. So it was pretty simple. The host mode is very simple, and if someone wants to try it, you can easily try it out using the Android documentation given, and I'll show the repository later, which I have created. So in that, I have created two branches, dev host and dev accessory. So host mode contains all the host mode data. For now, both the applications are developed separately, but at later point, we can combine, if required, host and accessory mode into one application. So accessory mode, the main thing which I want to talk about. So in our case, we'll be going with accessory mode because I understand that we have to communicate with a Raspberry Pi in the ASP project. So I don't have a Raspberry Pi, but I tested it with my laptop. Now, as I said, when we connect the Android device to the laptop, how does the devices know that who is the host and who is the accessory, right? Because both, even the laptop is capable of powering the bus, and even the Android device is capable of powering the bus. Whereas in case of connecting Android to Arduino, we know that Android is powering the bus and it's powering the Arduino as well. So that was pretty straightforward host mode. But in such situations, or when you connect it with the Raspberry Pi also, uh, how does this work out? So that's why we have accessory mode. And I haven't tested this with Raspberry Pi, but I saw on the internet that Raspberry Pi does not support accessory mode. Like Raspberry Pi cannot act as an accessory. So that's why we are this app was made for the Android device to act as an accessory, and the Raspberry Pi or the PC to act as a host. So for doing that, it's not straightforward. You have to implement something called as Android Open Accessory Protocol. Now what this protocol does is that, let's say, if I connect phone to my laptop and I want my laptop to be the host, so laptop has to literally say, or initiate this protocol, which will basically say the Android OS that I am the host and you are the accessory. So that is basically the whole protocol, and I'll talk about the protocol. How does the protocol work? So again, this depends on VID and PID. So it's divided into 4 steps over here. So as you can see right now, okay, my VID PID keeps changing over here. Just a second. Yeah, so right now you can see my this thing is already in host mode over here. So is already in accessory mode. Okay, so earlier you can see that the VID and PID was something else, 0489C001 over here. So this was a different VID and PID. It's not default VID and PID values. When the Android device goes in accessory mode, its VID and PID are defined by Google as 18D1, and PID can be any one of these 6 values. So right now I have kept it in accessory mode, so you can see over here that this is the mode. So yeah, I'll discuss the accessory protocol. How does this work? Yes.
So how did you move from the regular connection to the host mode or the accessory mode?
I'll just show it to you. Actually, I had run the script earlier, so it was running in the background. So I'll just show it to you again. So this is the protocol I'll show you. So how does the protocol work? First, you see that the connected Android device, what the VID and PID is, it matching with these values? Is the VID equal to this, or is PID one among these values? If yes, then the device is already in accessory mode. If not, then you have to initiate the protocol. So that's the step 1. Once you know that okay, device is not in accessory mode and I have to initiate the protocol, so then what you do is you send a control request, control transfer mode, which I just talked about earlier. So you send a control request saying that basically there's the request format is it's called a request format called 51. So you send that request to the Android device saying that I want to initiate this protocol, I am initiating this protocol. And once you get a feedback from that, what you do is you send a control request sending the device descriptor. Now what is a device descriptor? Basically it describes the whole device. So if I'm the laptop and I want to be the host, then I'll send all my details such as manufacturer name, and I'll just show it to you how the device descriptor looks like. Yes, over here. So my device descriptor is this. So manufacturer, I have just given some random string name as manufacturer, my model name, my descriptor, my description, why I'm initiating this, my version, my URL, and so these are some parameters which defines the device descriptor. So basically, this just defines your device, like this is who I am. While you are communicating with an accessory, this is how you define that these are the various things about me, and this is who I am. So that's how you do this. And once you do that, you send a control request again after that, saying that okay, now let's start accessory mode. So this is the 3 steps, and this is the simple thing which I've written over here. I've created a separate class for this whole protocol, and it does the whole job. I'll just show it to you. So right now,
Vishwa,
yes,
can you increase the font on this?
sure, sir. I think I forgot how do we do that. Wait, Control Shift, and then
This is Visual Studio.
yes, sir. Yes, I don't know the shortcut over here.
No, maybe some of our friends here might know.
Yeah, if anybody knows the shortcut, please do let me know.
I think
Control and scroll the mouse.
Control
Yeah,
plus.
I tried that, but it's not working actually. I tried that, but yeah, it's
Did
just not.
you try Control plus?
Yeah, Control plus. Okay. Wait a second. Yeah. Now it's working. Yes. Okay. Too much screens. This is just too much.
Control minus will.
Yeah, I'm doing that. Yes. Sir, a little more or?
No. Little bit. You increase it a little bit more.
Yeah. Little more, sir. Yeah.
Little more. One more maybe should do the trick.
Yeah. I don't know. It's just increasing a lot on one
Yeah.
scroll.
Yeah, that's okay. This is good. This is good. Oh no.
I don't know what's happening with my laptop.
No, I think there is a latency. It is responding a little late. What you do
Yeah,
is
yeah,
just give
I
it a couple of seconds to stabilize.
yeah. Yeah, meanwhile, I'll show this. So right now I reconnected my device over here, and yeah, right now you can see, I don't know why this is getting changed a lot.
Okay, it looks like now it is no longer in the accessory mode.
Yeah, it's no longer in the access because I reconnected the device. So that's why it's no longer in the mode. Yes, I just reconnected this, and then now, yeah, now I just gave the permission for using. So yeah, over here you can see this is the VID and this is my PID uh, in default mode. So I think now this has stabilized. I think, yeah. So okay, so I have mentioned this. I have basically written this VID and PID over here, so that my laptop knows which device I have to initiate this protocol. So you have to mention this over here, and this is the class which I told you, and this is the main file where I'm using this class, and a few things are running over here. So now if I run this over here, I'll just run this again. Yeah, so you can see it first says that looking for devices, a device not in accessory mode, initiating AOI protocol. It does all 4 steps, and then it says okay, AOI version detected to device in accessory mode. And now if I press S and if I start sending data from here, I can see the stream over here.
So if you now go to the terminal, it should show that it is in the accessory mode.
Yes. If I, yeah, Android powered device in accessory mode with ADB support. So right now it's in accessory mode.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, so this is the whole thing, and I'm using the same class for this. Is like a normal file. This is not written in ROS, but I mean, there's I can include this file in the workspace, my ROS workspace, and then use it in the ROS for ROS based communication. So this is the whole protocol, and then yeah, this is, as I told you. So I made a different class for the whole AOA protocol, initiating the AOA protocol, and I'm using PyUSB library right now. So I have written this in Python for ease, but there is PyUSB is basically written on top of another C++ library, which is libusb. Uh, but I have used PyUSB for now. And the class has these basic functions. Basically, first step is detect device. So it says that okay, whether my device is in accessory mode or not. So that's what it returns. And then if not, then I'll say that okay, please connect and initiate the AOA protocol. So this is that function. And then basically get the endpoint. So as I said earlier, that you have to form there are pipes which forms these logical connection between the host and the endpoint. So you need to know the endpoint for transferring the data. So you get the endpoint, and then this is basically for checking connection. So I'll be reading continuously. So while in a while loop, I can just say that while connection is there, read the data, and I can use this function to close the connection which is existing. So I have basically abstracted it into these few functions which can be used for reading data from Android device.
So you have created this library out of
No,
the.
no. PyUSB is the library, but I have created this higher level functions using the PyUSB functionality.
You have used these. You have created these
Yes.
functions to be able to access. Okay.
Yes. So as I told you over here, I have AOAP class. So here I have defined detect device and all the other things, connect. So I've defined these functions over here. Yeah. So
Okay, got
PyUSB is
it.
just for USB initiate for USB protocol implementation. That's the work of PyUSB. But the whole AOA protocol has to be written using the PyUSB. So that is the whole thing which I've implemented in this class, AOAP.
Got it.
And yeah, and yeah, so these functions are there for just the AOA protocol and reading the data. And if you remember, I had shown you this table over here. So this is how the string comes. So you have to parse this data and know that, okay, this is accelerometer data or this is gyroscope data, because we'll be receiving multiple sensor data. So you have to parse this string. So in the same class, I have included 2 more functions which tell you about the, which give you the parse data or returns to you the sensor number, or which sensor data is this. And this is the GitHub repository. And I have created a ROS workspace for this. I mean, I've implemented this in ROS also. So that also I'll show the demo later. And yeah, about the app usage. So yeah, that's the whole implementation. Now I have a few slides on how can the app be used, and yeah, a few things to know while using the app. So currently I have, I'll show the repository itself, how it is. So this is the whole repository, and the whole documentation is updated. So you can download the APK files over here, but this is not, finally released app. This is just, I have just uploaded the APK files directly, but this is not a released application as yet. So you can download the APK files from there and install the application on your phone, and then you can just connect. You need to know the VID and PID of your device, and you have to give that as an input to the various functions which are defined in the AOAP class. And then once you know the VID and PID, you can initiate these protocols. And then once, as I showed you, once your device goes in accessory mode, now here are the few things which you need to know, that once your device goes in accessory mode, you will get this warning over here: USB host initiating AOAP, and all these things are basically defined in the device descriptor, which I just showed you. So this warning comes up because the Android doesn't know that there is an application in your device which is trying to which requires the accessory, which is initiating this, which will be using this USB connection for data transfer. So I wasn't able to catch this action in the Android application, and I found that there's no workaround for this as yet. So you can just click on cancel over here. You will get this dialog box once. You can just click on cancel, and then you just select the sensors which you require. Click on send, and it will say that, okay, allow USB to communicate. Press on OK, and then all the data will be streamed. Yes.
I'm a little confused. So once you get this USB host initiating AOAP, you're supposed to hit cancel.
Yeah. So this is basically just a warning thrown by Android, saying that it didn't find any application on your device which requires this accessory mode, although we do have an application.
Because it is not a...
Yeah.
Is this because it is not linked to Google Store or something like that?
I don't think so, but it could be a possible reason. But the thing is, so in Android, you have, whether you are in host mode or accessory mode, whenever you connect the device to another device, so let's say if I connect this to an Arduino, it will say that host is detected. Android shows an action. So there is an action raised in Android. An action is basically, it's like an interrupt. So whenever something happens, you get an action saying that, okay, this happened, if you want to take an action from something. So for accessory also, when accessory is connected, Android should ideally show up an action saying that, okay, Android accessory has been detected over here. But unfortunately, the Android OS as of now is not able to capture this action for some reason. And I found that there's no workaround for this as of now. So you get this warning, you can just ignore the warning by clicking on cancel. And I can actually show a basic demo on Python itself. So if right now, as we saw that, second. Yes. So right now, as we saw, the device is already in accessory mode. Now, if I open the app and I just click on some data that says click acceleration, I click on send on my phone. I just did that. And now if I press S over here, it will... Okay, this is plotting because I was trying to plot it yesterday. So basically, you can see the data like this over here. So it's plotting right now. And
okay. That is plotting your accelerometer data?
Yes, that was plotting my accelerometer data. Yes. So, but that plotting is not working correctly. I was just working around with this. I forgot that it's incomplete as of now. But you can see you can see the data like that, and you can receive any data like this on your main.py. And yeah, so that's how
So
the whole thing works.
the
I can
script of main.py has to be running on your Raspberry Pi when we actually do the connection, correct?
Yes. I can
Oh,
actually show a ROS demo. So I have done this thing where uh, uh, basically all the data which is received by the laptop is being published. The topics are being published from on the laptop, and I can see that. So if you want to see that, I can
sure,
just share. Yeah.
sure, definitely would like to see that.
Okay. So uh, I just clear this. So right now. Yes. So I'm just running this node right now, and now I can just click on new window. And currently what I've done is I've just selected 3 topics, which it's acceleration. I'll just show it to you. So right now, accelerometer, GPS, and gyroscope, only 3 data's topic I have created, because it's not decided which all sensor data will be sending from the smartphone. Based on that, we have to decide the topic. So right now I've just chosen that these 3 topics are incoming for sure, and I'll just hit send from over here. And if I do ROS topic echo accelerometer, so we can see the accelerometer data. This is with gravity. So if I just try to move this, and it works fine over here.
Fantastic.
Yes, so this is, yeah, so this is, I just showed one topic. Similarly, you can see GPS and gyroscope as well in ROS, and a few more things. Yeah, that's the app usage, and there are a few known issues and bugs. So make sure you turn on your location each time and give permission all the time, and make sure you don't put your phone on sleep mode, because then after that data won't be sent. And this is interesting error which I have mentioned in the repo as well if you're trying to use it. So if you get this error while running the main script, uh, basically Ubuntu has this weird annoying thing where you have to set UDEV rules uh, for communicating, for detecting this phone via USB. So you have to add one file in your UDEV folder, and you can work around with that. So that is a known issue or bug, you can say. And about future development, currently host and accessory mode are not in single app, they are separate apps. Based on the requirement, both can be combined into one single app. uh, Better UI, allowing to set custom sampling frequency. As I said, right now it's being sent at 50 hertz, and ROS Java integration on Android. So this is something I think Abhilash sir, you had mentioned earlier, that having ROS node on the mobile phone itself. But I was trying to look around for this, but this is actually not possible as of now, because the current version of ROS supported by ROS Java is melodic, I guess, or kinetic, and
Okay.
I'm using Noetic, ROS Noetic. So I don't know. One thing I don't know if the connection will work, because I have Noetic, and on my phone I'll be using uh, a previous version, Kinetic or Melodic. Uh, and secondly, for making that app, I wasn't able to do it in my current Ubuntu 20.04, because I think I wasn't able to import those ROS files because they were of previous version. So
Oh, is it? Okay.
yes, I was
We'll
facing
discuss
that.
more about this. What you can
Yes.
do is also you can
Mhm.
build from source if you want to work off of a previous
Mhm.
version. See, the
Mhm.
idea is if you use ROS Java,
Mhm.
then it is running independent. You are only sending the information through a connection to the ROS core. But
Mhm.
again,
Yes.
you probably are right that can a ROS node running on Noetic or running on Melodic uh, communicate with a ROS core which is running on Noetic?
Mm. I
That's a question which I
I
don't know
think
the answer
it's
to.
I think it so ROS recently launched its own mobile application, ROS Mobile, which does the similar job at this application, but it's a very extensive application. Like, it has a lot of other functionalities as well. So I don't know on their GitHub, they haven't mentioned which version they are using, but they said it's tested with Melodic, and ROS Java as of now is only supporting till Kinetic, I guess. So I think
Okay.
it should work, but I don't know. Noetic is very different build, so I'm not sure if that integration will work as of now. So that is
Yeah,
something.
Noetic is transforming to Python 3, so that may cause some
Yeah.
problems.
Yes. Yes.
We are not sure, but that's worth investigating at some point down the line after we have a
Yes.
working version working, right?
Sure. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Definitely. And last two things, like dead reckoning using IMU and GPS data. So that is something which I just started working on last week. So if can we get position and orientation using the IMU and GPS data, because GPS frequency is very low, 5 or 7 seconds, and IMU has a lot of errors. So can we do sensor fusion and do dead reckoning using these two sensors? That is something
Oh,
which is currently being done.
yeah. Are you planning to do this from scratch?
Uh, yes. I mean,
Usually,
I'm yet to. I just did just kind of literature review, like of how this can be done. But I think Avanish sir was also telling me that there is some inbuilt functionality in ROS itself, which I haven't checked yet. So for sensor
yeah,
fusion.
there
So
is a package called robot localization,
okay,
and
okay,
it can start off a new node as an EKF localization node, where it can
okay,
receive these topics on accelerometer data and on
okay,
IMU data
okay,
and GPS data, and it can fuse you to give you a best estimate of the
okay,
current
okay,
position, the entire state
okay,
vector.
okay, okay.
So
I
one
haven't
way
checked
to,
it.
yeah, one way
Mhm,
to go would be to go try that out, because that is something which has been developed, but I'm
mhm,
not sure whether it is robust. The problem with most of these open source codes is
mhm,
that the robustness cannot be guaranteed. Although a lot of work has been done on robot localization, so I presume it is robust, but
mhm.
I've not tested it myself. So we'll have to kind of
Okay.
run a couple of examples and make sure that
Okay.
that's working fine.
Okay. Okay. I'll,
If
I'll,
it
I'll
is,
definitely
yeah,
check
if
that
it
out
is
once.
not, then we might
Mhm.
have to program our own. That might be
Okay.
a approach to
Okay.
go with.
Got it. Got it. Fine. I'll check it out once, and then yeah, I'll try reading up on it.
Okay.
And yeah, and if there are, so this app was developed because I am not very proficient in Android app development, so there may be some other bugs which I may have missed. So if you come across any bugs, so you can just raise an issue in this uh, GitHub repo, and I'll try to resolve them. And I think that's all. This is the references, and yeah, a more extensive documentation can be found on this repo. So everything has been updated. Uh, One thing, this is currently private, sir. So I haven't released this. So we can discuss like how, if we are supposed to release this. So how could we do that?
Yes, definitely. We
Yes.
would plan to release it at some point once we have made
Mhm.
sure it's working in a full life condition.
Mhm.
We are able to implement it on the vehicle. We'll
Mhm.
definitely discuss about releasing it.
Yes,
It
sir.
does make sense to take it
Mhm.
out. The
Mhm.
only thing is, what I would suggest is we have about a big research group, about 15 people or so.
Mhm.
So, and some of them are definitely be going to definitely be going to using this application for collection of the data on the vehicle. So what I
Okay.
would suggest is right now this doesn't require any vehicle per se. It only
Mhm.
requires you to connect your smartphone and your you
Mhm.
need to have an Ubuntu connection. That's all. That's all that is
Mhm.
needed here. So
Yes.
maybe people in our research group can try it out. That way, what will happen is it will be tested on different smartphones. It will be
Yes.
tested on different versions, and we can make sure that if there are any bugs, we can try to kind of find them all and try to
Mhm.
correct for them. Okay,
Sure,
so
sir. So I
whoever is
think
in our,
if we have like for releasing this to the whole research group, I think because we are like 15 members, I guess. So I think if we have a GitHub organization, that, like we can make a GitHub organization for the research group, and then we can make just add the members over there, and I can make it public for only the research group members, so everyone can access it that way.
yes, I think that will be the best way to go about it. I
Mhm.
want to kind of do that for all the other repositories as well, so that
Okay.
everybody in the research group has access to every other repository which was developed by the research group. So you and I will discuss a little later, Vishwa. You will help me
Sure.
set that up,
Sure.
and we will go ahead with that. Okay.
Okay.
Any other questions from others?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was thinking like, what is the message type that is used in the ROS topic?
Message type.
Is it a custom type or
Yeah, it's a custom message. Custom message. Yeah.
maybe I have a small suggestion. Like maybe we
Okay.
can probably put it in the ROS message types that is defined for acceleration, pose,
Yeah.
etc. So that
Yes.
if
Yes.
probably like if you want to use some packages that is used in ROS later, we can directly put those topics, give those topics inside those packages, and we can take it whatever you want.
Yeah, and I think that's a very
Actually,
good
yes.
suggestion from Manoranjan.
Yeah.
Yeah, because if you look at sensor messages in ROS, if you put it in that format, it will be much easily usable. Because say suppose tomorrow you want to learn the robot localization package, it will expect sensor messages to be in the format of the ROS.
Yes. Definitely.
It really doesn't take much effort to do that. It's a very simple job. You only have to kind of set up your data in that format and publish it on that format. That's all.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yeah, I'll update that. That's
We
actually a nice
just have
suggestion.
to import that topic. I mean, you have to, like here you have made a separate message, right? So similarly, that message type will have a similar, you can just import it.
Yeah, it's a similar. Yeah, I got it. Similar data type for that. Yeah, I use that. Yeah, I'll use that. Actually, yeah, that's a nice suggestion. Yes.
Yeah, you can even get in touch with Manoranjan because he has had some experience with this of using the sensor data types from the ROS. So how to kind of bring that in and how to import that in, he can kind of guide you very quickly rather than spending a lot of time on reading up on it.
Sure, sir. I will.
And you have everybody's contact on that WhatsApp group.
Yes.
So you can absolutely get in touch with anybody in the group.
Yes, sir. Definitely.
All right. More comments, suggestions?
Yeah.
Avanish, any comments from your side?
No, sir. All good. I mean, we are discussing for this like a quite long time. So, of course, as long as people start using this app and we start making this as an application, then we'll come across so many bugs probably. So, hopefully, at that time, we'll try to improve. Because so far what I am doing is right now I'm also taking that as a string format, and whatever we are receiving from the Android sensor, it comes as a string, and then we save it in a file because the data acquisition is also important. So that's what we are doing it. We are saving now at the by end. I'm trying to save it in a memory card, and later we'll just copy it using SSH command to our main PC.
No. Why you want to do all of that? Once you have it on ROS, simply ROS bag record will do the trick. It will record every topic, every message which comes in with the timestamp. Everything gets recorded straight.
Right, sir. But what I want it to be like, let's say, for example, I want to analyze the file then and there. So let's say, for example, I'm doing certain maneuvering test, and I want to analyze that how the motion is right now. So what I'll do is I'll straight away take that text file, import it in my MATLAB, and I'll try to do some analysis. So I'm just looking forward for that aspect.
Oh, okay, correct me if I'm wrong. Like when you are doing the test,
yes, sir.
Is your simulation still continuing, or is your vehicle continuing to do the maneuvering test?
Sorry, sir, I didn't get.
So when you are trying to access that text file, by that time your test has ended, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
Not retrieving the vehicle, but the test has stopped.
Right. Yes, sir.
then ROSBAG record is a better way to go, I think. You might want to explore that. Okay, this is not to say that you don't want to have a text file which is custom built, but a ROSBAG record just makes it easier. You can play back the ROSBAG anytime you want, and it will just feed back the sensor information in the same manner as if the simulation were running in real time. And then you can play around with it and do things with it.
Okay.
Okay,
So
right. Something to explore.
What I was thinking is, because let's say my shore station computer is Windows, and let's say I do not have the ROS there.
Okay.
So in that sense only I was thinking, like, just trying to...
you want to use it with MATLAB, isn't it? At the end of the day.
Right.
You can import a ROSBAG into MATLAB. MATLAB now has the features to get interacted with ROS. You just have to get the robotics toolbox and it'll do the job.
Yes.
No, I'm saying this only to save you some effort. It may not be necessary to go through the entire process if there is an easier, already tested and a benchmarked way which exists. That's the whole point.
Okay, right.
Okay, so you might want to look at ROSBAG as one option, and how to import ROSBAGs into MATLAB. If you just do a quick search, they have an extensive, they're now trying to come up with extensive amount of support for ROS in MATLAB. So which you can leverage for your advantage for such applications at least. All right, any other questions, queries? All right, let me stop recording.